Welcome everybody to this ENQA webinar on the role of quality assurance in supporting cultures of academic integrity. I will start just with a few very practical pieces of information before we dive into the content. As you may have noticed, the webinar is being recorded. The recording will be made available on the ENQA website and YouTube channel after the webinar. The presentations that you see today will also be available on the ENQA website. So they'll be there for a resource afterwards for you and your colleagues. And please do use the chat function. We'll be monitoring the chat function throughout. You can use it for your questions and your comments, perhaps also to share reflections on how this topic is addressed in your own system. And the colleagues speaking in the webinar, Sue and Yvonne, who've been leading our academic integrity working group, they have reassured me that if we don't have the opportunity to address all the questions during the discussion part of the webinar later today, later this morning, they will answer them in written format afterwards. So they've kindly offered to take some time to do that, and we will share that in all the answers to the questions in a written document after the webinar. So don't hesitate to post your questions and comments throughout. We're going to run through all the presentations first and then take the discussion afterwards. So I think that for the practicalities, and now I'd like to hand over to ENQA's Vice President, Christina Gitilice, who will give us some welcome words to today's webinar. Christina, the microphone is yours.
Thank you, Anna. Indeed, my role would be just to welcome you on behalf of the ENQA board to today's webinar, which has a very important and interesting theme, and I think it's very nice that we are not referring to academic integrity as such, but how to support culture of academic integrity, which goes beyond just the definition of this fundamental value of higher education. As you have seen already for the program, we are discussing today the outcomes of the work of ENQA's working group, which have been started in 2021. So there are already 3 years past it. And I want to underline that working groups are a very important way for ENQA to innovate and to develop studies or policies in quality assurance, which is a very important part of the mission of the association. So we are very grateful to the members of the working group, to QAA for proposing the theme in the first place, and also to Sue and Yvonne for co-chairing the group, steering the work, and draft the report. We see that there is a lot of interest in the theme. If we look in the results of the QA Fit project, more than 60% of the quality assurance agencies believe that they should directly evaluate aspects related to the fundamental values of higher education, while a little bit under 40% think that they should be directly mentioned in the scope of the ESGs. And that indeed shows a lot of preoccupation on the thematic. And I think that in that sense, because agencies are different and they have different resources or experience, the report that we are going to discuss today is offering very valuable guidance in that sense. Still, there is, at least in what it concerns quality assurance in support of the academic integrity or the other fundamental values, we think that there is knowledge and common understanding to be built. But anyhow, the preoccupation for the subject shows that I think we can all agree quality of education cannot exist without looking at the fundamental values. While nevertheless, I think it's important to think that we are not the only ones which have attributions or activities in the field, and maybe sometimes we should just leave that to also other bodies and institutions. Just to put it a little bit into the context, there is a lot of preoccupation for the subject also within the work of the Bologna follow-up group. There was a working group which have developed statements, so definitions, because first of all, we need to understand what we are talking about. And the first definition have been approved in 2020 through the Rome Communique, and that was the one for academic freedom. And in Tirana this year, we have also statements approved by the ministers for the other 5 fundamental values, including the academic integrity. There is also going to be work this work period. They will finalize a monitoring framework for the fundamental values. Also, a first comprehensive monitoring exercise is going to be put in practice, and that monitoring framework should be approved by the ministers in 2027. And I think that, of course, there is a need for us to closely look into how this work is going. And here, ENQA's role is very important. As you know, we are consultative members in the Bologna follow-up group, and we are part of their work and join the meetings of the BFUG, where all of those results are being presented. Concluding, because I think I'm already took too much of your time, I just want to thank the working group for their work. That means to give up on what they have to do in their own agencies. So we are very grateful to that. To the contributors and panelists for being today with us, and of course to all of you for participation. Thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to the presentations and discussions.
Thank you, Christina, for the broader context of this webinar. And as I've said, we've got a lot to get through in the next 50 minutes. So I will, without any further ado, hand over to Sue and Yvonne. Sue comes from the agency in Ireland, and Yvonne from NVIO in the Netherlands. And I give you the floor to present some highlights from the work of the ENQA working group.
Thanks so much, Anna, and welcome to everybody. It's great to see so many people here. What a lot of interest in academic integrity. Very much, that's very much a topic, as you can imagine, close to our hearts. So on behalf of the working group members, and in particular on behalf of the working group members who are all participating in this webinar, I'd like to say welcome to you all and thank you so much for coming. I hope you get something out of this, and we'd really appreciate any questions that you have, and which we have some time to address at the end of our talk. I'm going to do the first bit. I'm then going to hand over to Yvonne for the nitty-gritty, all the data and analysis. And we'll then hand over to our other panelists, the working group members, who will add some reflections based on what they're doing in their own agencies. Okay, so I really like that comment too about cultures of academic integrity that Christina just said there, supporting cultures of academic integrity. That's very much a key message that came out of our research, and as you can see, is reflected in the title here. Okay, so let's get started. What is meant by academic integrity? There are lots of definitions out there. So as we've put in the report, I just wanted to share with you again the definition that we have used, that the working group agreed to use at the beginning of all our activity. And here it is. It's from the European Network for Academic Integrity, their glossary. If you don't know the European Network, well worth engaging with. Lots of information there, all sorts of resources as well. And this is their current definition of academic integrity. You may or may not entirely agree with it. I know some people have had issues with the term compliance, but this is the one we took for after kind of voting on all that was out there. This is a second one that is from the International Center for Academic Integrity based in the US. And again, they have another definition, not incredibly different to the one which ENII has above there. But as you can see, they are very clear on the 6 key values that academic integrity as a commitment needs to embrace. And those are, as you can see here, honesty, trust, fairness, respect, responsibility, and really interestingly, courage as well. So we've included both these definitions in the report. You may well have seen them there too. Some key concepts, and I'm just going to start this bit by looking at the bottom, if you like, the two writers of this quote, which is the late Tracy Britag, who was a real shaker and mover in the field of academic integrity, working from the University of New South Wales in Australia, and also doing a lot of work for the Australian Quality and Qualifications Agency, TEQSA. TEQSA themselves are well worth looking into. They have a fantastic array of resources which are free to anyone who logs on to their website. This is from a 2019 article. You'll see the reference in the report by Tracy Britag and her colleague at UNSW, Michael Peters. I'll just give you a moment to read it. As you can see, we've highlighted in different colors the key points in this quote, all of which really resonated in our data. And that's why we have really highlighted this piece of text. It'd be really interesting to know which pieces here resonate most particularly with you. So if you'd like to put in the chat the colored piece or pieces that really resonate with you, we can come back to them maybe with Anna at the end of the talk. One piece that I really like is the piece in green, because we talk so much about students and students not behaving, not doing what we expect them to do. And it all rests on their shoulders. So I kind of really like what Britag and Peters say here in relation to that. Oops, sorry. Okay, and here is the standard guideline, the policy for in the ESGs. And again, you'll see it quoted in the report. We've put it here. And here are some quotes from the report that sort of uphold this particular ESG. So here's Michael Peters again from 2018. And this quote really is in answer to people who say, but students have always cheated. Cheating has been going on for hundreds of years. Why is it being picked up as a particular problem here? And that's, of course, very true. They have always cheated, but of course, with the advent of the, I suppose, what would you call them, in inverted commas, study, homework, help, websites, the online industry, that has really moved the goalposts. And how the myriad of ways in which learners can now, let's say, circumnavigate learning is very different from what it was even 5 years ago, never mind 100. Here's Professor Kath Ellis. This is actually also in the report. She's quoted from a meeting she had with Quality and Qualifications Ireland in 2020. And here she was quoting from previous research. That research goes back to 2015, in which she said 4% of Australian students from her research had been shown, or had their research had revealed, had previously used commercial tutoring services. So that's the commercial online services, not, you know, getting a friend to help you or parents giving you some advice. So, and of course, even in this was on foot of the My Master scandal in Australia, which really drove and was the trigger for all the activity with Texit in Australia and subsequently internationally as well. My Master scandal was journalists who hacked in to a cheating services site and found all the students requesting work for to be done for them for a fee. So she said 4% of Australian students, and that certainly at the time when she was talking to higher education educators in Ireland was felt to be a high number. Her reply when people have come back to her subsequently, or even at this time, saying, goodness, that might have been the case in Australia, but that won't be happening in my jurisdiction, is, why would it be any different in your jurisdiction? Why would Australia be any different? And she then poses the question, if you're not identifying at least 4% of your undergraduate student body having used commercial tutoring services, that isn't because it's not happening. That may well be because you're simply not capturing it. Okay, and our last quote here, again from the report, you may recognize it, is from Professor Phil Newton from Swansea University. And this is perhaps, this represents the most recent research that, or at least that we have on this slide. And I'll just give you a moment to remind yourself, read it. And I think you can see from that the numbers are really quite significant. So this isn't a trivial industry. This isn't something that happens on the sidelines of higher education. This is a real threat, both to the integrity of our higher education systems and, of course, to the integrity of our qualifications. All the references to these pieces can be found in the report. So a bit about the academic integrity landscape. Yvonne will go into that in more detail in a moment, but I just wanted to share with you this Venn diagram. So here we have academic integrity. Here we have assessment integrity. And last but not least, and of course, perhaps the most recent, AI to exercise our minds, artificial intelligence. And of course, they're all happening together. They're all intersecting. They're all creating what we've called the AI cubed wicked problem around how academic integrity can be upheld and promoted in such a complex and difficult environment. Okay, and I'm now going to hand over to Yvonne.
Right, thank you so much. I won't go into a tremendous amount of detail because I really invite you to read the report, which I can reassure you is very compact. But I will touch on 4 themes that emerged from the survey that many of the agencies in Europe generously filled in. The first thing I'm looking at is the academic integrity landscape. And this is what Sue referred to a moment ago. It helps to agree on common definitions. What we discovered in the survey is a huge range of interpretation of terms, of definitions. That was interesting in itself. So we need a common language to depart from so that we're all on the same page in terms of what we're talking about. The second theme is the need for research. It's very difficult to convince people of the need for action if we're dealing with a gut instinct or if we don't have data to back it up. And it's not much use to us having data from Australia because that's simply not going to convince people. So we really need to be pulling our resources and collecting data. And I would really encourage collaboration here. That we're not all reinventing the wheel or just working in your own little, your own region. The third thing is professional development. As Sue said, this shouldn't be on the shoulders of students alone. They, as in every other aspect of their studies, they need our support and our guidance. And our colleagues in higher education need our support and guidance as well. So we need to educate all stakeholders. The last one is the cheating industry in itself. This is a billion-dollar industry that's very difficult to thwart from where we are. But for us, the important thing is awareness raising here. I think we need to tell or make aware to our stakeholders just the scope of the problem so that they know that if an higher education institution is developing policy or strategy, that they're doing the right things for the right reason, that they're targeting the right vulnerabilities. Thank you, Anna. If we can move on. I have 3 detailed slides. They are from the report. I won't go into each thing on these slides. I'm just going to highlight one thing on each, so you can take the time to read it as I'm talking. Here, I would just like to highlight what Christina said earlier. There's a lot going on. So Christina talked about the fundamental values in the BFUG. I'd like to highlight the incredible work by the Council of Europe, and the work by the European Network of Academic Integrity. There's a lot going on out there. But again, we need to be aware of what different partners are doing, different stakeholders are doing, so that we can collaborate and work together. So that's the European level. We also discovered from the data in the survey, but also from the very valuable interviews that we conducted, that at a national level, there's a lot of different initiatives. Again, it does help to collaborate so that we align our expectations. I mean, we have this wonderful Bologna process, and I do believe that academic integrity also needs to have as a goal that we're working in this together in the European higher education area. An interesting thing here is, are we too late? It's good to think about that. Is higher education perhaps too late? Should we also be sharing with our other stakeholders in primary and secondary education that they need to be getting onto this? The last one, Anna, thank you. At an institutional level, so this is really institutions, just as we say that at the agencies, you should make academic integrity someone's job, institutions really need to have somebody who's dedicated to this, who understands it, who's abreast of developments and is capable of collaborating with other stakeholders, other institutions, people from industry. So it's really important that we're training people and that we're creating awareness, and that ultimately that we see the establishment of effective frameworks in institutions, but hopefully also in agencies. That was a lot from me, so I do really encourage you to look at the report. And I'd actually like to hand over now to Andrea, who was one of our valued members of the working group. Andrea, together with Kirsty and Ulrika, has kindly agreed to talk a little bit about what's happening at her agency. Andrea, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Yvonne, and good morning to everybody. As Yvonne said, I was representing the Slovak Accreditation Agency for Higher Education in this project and in this working group. And I would like to add some remarks how we are dealing with this issue of academic integrity in Slovakia and in our agency. I've divided it to several points. So first, I would like to say that on the agency level, the agency itself has its code of ethics and professional conduct that is binding for all members of all authorities of agency, for the reviewers, review panel members, and also the staff. Also, in our accreditation criteria, we have included several articles that are dedicated to academic integrity and that apply both for students and also for the academic staff of the institutions. The first part is dedicated to scientific integrity, academic ethics, plagiarism, and other forms of academic fraud, and states that the institutions should have some mechanism that enable detection of this academic fraud and ensure that consequences are applied. And the second part of criteria is dedicated to the thesis and rigorous papers. And again, the institution should provide some measures to effective detection and consistent penalization of academic fraud. Also, during the last 2 years, we applied this criteria within the first round of institutional accreditations on all HAEs. In Slovakia, it's mandatory to have institutional accreditation, and we went through the whole round on all the institutions. And now we are in the process of summarizing all the findings and important recommendations from the review panels to the institutions. And it's not finalized yet, so I would like to share some most important general findings and recommendations that are connected to academic integrity. One group of the recommendations is taking into account that more systematic approach to academic ethics with defined rules and sanctions should be applied, because many of the institutions have only ad hoc solutions for some academic fraud issues. Then the second group of recommendations is dealing with the mandatory use of internationally accepted anti-plagiarism systems. Since in Slovakia we have some national central register for final thesis, but it's not enough. It's very limited with the amount of the papers that are in there. So the review panel strongly recommend the use of some international accepted systems. Then another suggestion would be for regular collection of information to monitor trends in academic ethic violations, since this would help to better decision-making for application of some measures. And then, of course, increase of awareness between all academic staff and students through regular training sessions. That's for agency. On the national level, since the end of last year, there was introduced a new code of research integrity and ethics in Slovakia. This code aligns with international and, of course, European legislation and similar domestic and international documents. Is considered as binding frameworks for identifying and addressing misconduct and failures in the academic environment. Between the co-authors of this code was also one member of the executive board of the agency and also several of our experts from the review panels. As for the discussions now that are going on the national level, the first big discussion or topic is the diploma thesis, their purpose and their form in the era of the artificial intelligence, how to take it into account, if the thesis should still be written the way they are used to, but again, in compliance with the national qualification framework and the learning outcomes that should be reached and should be proved by the diploma thesis. The whole usage of AI, how to acknowledge it, and what is the ethics behind it as the second big topic, and then publications in predatory journals versus the financing of institutions based on the number of publications. So that's the third topic. Just to conclude and to stress just one thing from the project and from the report, there is a strong recommendation for agencies, and I would really like to say that I really believe that we are dealing with similar issues within academic integrity in several countries. So to share and to develop common good practices, cooperate between agencies, and finding solutions at global or cross-border level. That would be my recommendation that I would like to stress out. So thank you. That's for Slovakia.
So thank you, Andrea, for your insights into what's happening in your area and within your agency and in your country. So thank you very much for those insights. My area is a little bit different, and the agency in which I work is a little bit different. It's a very specific work area. We are a professional and statutory regulatory body, a PSRB, which means that we are only looking at a small area that's being delivered by an HEI. So the HEIs are already governed by a set of standards that are administered by other agencies that look at degrees as a whole, and there is already quite a bit more around academic misconduct and assessment integrity, and all universities have to adhere to those conditions already. What we do is we then come in and we look specifically at veterinary and vet nursing degree programs. So there's already a layer that's been introduced, and that's been updated relatively recently. And as I said, there's a layer already that the HEIs have to adhere to in terms of academic integrity and the focus on academic misconduct. When we come in, we're looking specifically at what is happening to be able to guarantee that the graduates are coming out of their degree program as what we call day one competent. They are ready to start working on the first day of graduation as either a vet or a vet nurse. There's no further introduction to that point. So it's a very high stakes landscape. These graduates have worked extremely hard, and it is very competitive, and they need to be able to prove that they are able to work in the workplace. So there is potentially quite a pressure on them to be able to achieve and to be able to look at the outcomes. Our role as an agency is how are we supporting the people who are delivering those programs to ensure that their graduates are actually coming out of that clean, in as much as they have achieved what they have achieved on their own merits. And the HEIs are very aware of the issues. It's not as if they're coming into this blind. They are aware of the issues, and they are quite rightly quite proud of what they do to be able to satisfy themselves and us as the agency, as the regulatory body, that the students who are graduating have done this without cheating, with academic integrity, and they are able to work very hard on this. There was a huge spike in awareness during the pandemic because all of a sudden a lot of assessment methods changed. And our role at that point was to support our programs to be able to help them make sure that the students graduating during that period were graduating with the same integrity as students who had graduated previously or who are going to graduate since. So an awful lot of work was done around especially assessment integrity during that time, both in the veterinary programs and the vet nursing programs. And in fact, the HEIs had to report to us every 3 months as to what they were doing to ensure academic integrity was being maintained. And actually, although it was a very rapid period of change, it has set in place some very good practice, and it has made a lot of our vet schools and vet nursing programs re-examine their assessment methodologies to ensure that they are actually recognizing the areas in which there could be the opportunity for academic misconduct and to mitigate those. So it's very much a landscape where we are very aware of the issues, the HEIs are very aware of the issues, and it's very collaborative. It's working together. It's making sure that we are not imposing rules and regulations, but we're working together to say, where do you need support? How can we support you? How can we work together? And in order to do that, I think the HEIs are probably slightly ahead of the curve rather than the agency. A lot of the time we are playing catch up by looking at what they're doing and sharing good practice. And our role is to share that good practice and see what's happening within one program. Can that be replicated elsewhere? Can they support each other? Can they help each other? And we are making academic integrity a priority. So currently the standards with which we review our programs, it's implied all the way through the narrative that academic integrity is a priority, but not necessarily written loud. So that's where we need to do some work, is to make sure that that is instead of just being implied, that it is written, that it is there, that it is a standard as a standalone, as well as being a theme running throughout the standards. And I think possibly that's some of the stuff that we found out as a working group that maybe could be adopted through the ESG as well, that it is an implied area, that it's not just linked to one bit, but it has to be a common theme running through everything else. And also we can't just rely on what we're looking at now and what is happening in the here and now. What is going to be happening in the future? And as we have seen over the last 3-4 years, things are changing rapidly. Technology is changing rapidly. And we can't necessarily pin things on a type of technology, because by the time we've pinned that down, looked at it, created some kind of regulation or standard around it, it's been and gone, and the next big thing is happening. So how can we encompass this in terms of an overarching statement that will encompass all of the technologies, and obviously the massive impact that artificial intelligence is happening, that's looking at that at the moment. And I think it's not to run scared of these technologies, but to embrace them. And a lot of these technologies can be supporting academic integrity, and they can be supporting us finding incidences of misconduct, but it can also be supporting our teaching. And it's to embrace what is going to be happening with these technologies. How can we support our students to understand these technologies and understand the pros as well as the cons? Artificial intelligence is not going to go away, and certainly our graduates working within their profession are going to be relying on artificial intelligence to help them in their work. So how can we promote the positives as well as indicating to them the pitfalls, and how to avoid those pitfalls, and how to make sure that they are coming out of this with a good balanced understanding. So that's where we are as an agency. We've very much learned a huge amount in the last few years. We are making sure we're working collaboratively with our HEIs, and we are making sure that we are looking forward into the future as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Kirsty. I'm taking over from here. So a little while ago, ACU Austria held its annual conference on the topic of academic integrity in Vienna. And we were fortunate enough to have Yvonne as one of our guest speakers. So the idea came up to introduce the conference and the actions that are following from the conference today very briefly. And the way I'm doing that is that I will very briefly start about the legislative changes in Austria at the beginning of this year. Then I'll briefly talk about the key stakeholders and where to go from here in terms of our agency's next steps. You also find the QR code next to the title in case you would like to have a deeper look at the program. So getting started at the beginning of this year, we had changes that were introduced to our Higher Education Act. And those changes were part of those changes were about academic integrity, in particular about definitions of academic integrity. In Austria, we have 4 higher education sectors. They do not always communicate with each other, and they do have different sets of laws and different sets of terms. So one of the aims was to find a coherent definition that works for the whole higher education sector and that sets the scene for follow-up actions. So in the middle of the big bubble, you see one big term and phrase that has been introduced to the laws, which is the culture of academic and artistic integrity. In Austria, we have a very strong tradition of artistic higher education institutions. So academic and artistic integrity always come together by us, here in our context by law. The understanding of culture here is, as we have heard before, positive, preventative, and holistic settings that go beyond those good scientific practice systems that quite often only focus on the what we have heard before, the opposite of academic integrity, so what goes wrong. Most importantly for our sector is that academic integrity is, until this point, not yet focus of accreditation and audit processes, but it will be soon. So this legislative change said very clearly that we will look at artistic and academic integrity from now on. So ENQA Austria has decided to use the conference as a bridge and a motor to inform those changes and to have those very needed discussions with the higher education institutions about what it actually means and how can we move from there. Our key stakeholders, and we're moving to the right side of the slide now, we had a graphic recorded at our conference, which was great because she drew basically key arguments of the conference. So we have a little picture of our student voice at the very at the upper side, above the picture, the graphic. We started with a student voice. We were very keen and cautious to include all stakeholders, so the government sector, the international sector in terms of quality assurance. So we had Marie Boulong as an expert here, the artistic education sector, the medicine and non-artistic higher education sector. We have an agency for academic integrity in Austria. So all of them were part in the panel discussion and of the whole conference. Our keynote was given by Michael Draper, also from Swansea University. He introduced largely the ETINET platform and the ETINET recommendations for artistic integrity, which seemed for us very important to set the scene where it's all about culture. So he picked apart the idea, the concept, what does it mean for institutions to work on a culture. The outcomes were based on our 4 thematic themes. We had AI and artificial academic integrity. We had institutional strategies. We had the focus indeed on academic misconduct from a law perspective, which is very needed in our area. And we had a forum on artistic integrity separately. And as you see here, there was a call for more need for cooperation between those different levels, institutions, students, and staff. We had a call for first train and mediate and then sanction, a call for an increased embedding of actions in strategies, so it needs to be strategically embedded. And the whole focus on artistic integrity really was called a green field because there's so much to do. And it's absolutely not the same to talk about artistic integrity than when you talk about academic. And finally, moving to the where to go from here, bubble, what is ENQA Austria taking from the conference? I haven't mentioned the elephant in the room, which I just see a one, and our managing director, Jürgen Petersen, also had a conversation at the very end to see what quality assurance can do in this field. And we came up with 3 points. You see them there as icons on the way to go from here bubble. So we do have a very strong focus now on revising our regulations and starting adding it to accreditation and audit processes. This is work in progress, so we cannot give much detail at this stage, but it will happen soon. The second icon is about an increased focus on platforming and networking. So we are part of GAIN now. We are interested in eNICE work and so on. And we are also platforming ourselves, trying to be a platform for higher education institutions in Austria. And at the very end, we're trying to continue with this topic in form of another annual conference, perhaps next year. This is what ENQA Austria is doing in the field for the moment. Thank you very much. Back to you, Sue.
Thanks so much to Andrea, Ulrike, and Kirsty there. And as you can see, enormous amount of work has been happening in their areas, as well as contributing to the working group. Unfortunately, a leading member of our working group, Klemen Šubic from NACVIS in Slovenia, he can't be here, but he has sent us on some slides. I know time is really short, so I'm not going to read the text that he sent me, but you can see his email up here, and really his key message. Both with this slide where he's, as you can see, the title, Pursuing Academic Integrity Values in Slovenian HE, and his next slide, Challenges of Fostering Academic Integrity Values in EQA Procedures. He was very emphatic that as a result, not least of being involved in the working group, they have made significant advances and developments in their policies and procedures. So if you'd like to learn more, please feel free to contact Klemen. So we're going to stop our input there and go on to questions. Over to you.
Yes, thank you, Sue. Thank you to all the presenters. A huge amount of information there, and hopefully also some inspiration. I'll pick up on a couple of questions that we've received. One that's specifically to Kirsty, where one of the listeners would like to know a little bit more about the alternative assessment methods that you mentioned, and perhaps the link that has then with academic integrity and what some of the challenges were there.
Thank you. So the nature of the programme lends itself very well to practical assessments. So a lot of the assessments are carried out practically, which then does mean that they tend to be a verbal or oral assessment. Those have evolved over time, and they are becoming more holistic. So it's more of a holistic approach. So it's a structured oral exam as well, so that the candidates are all given the same questions in the same format, but they don't know what those questions are, and they're delivered sort of simultaneously. So having an oral exam does mitigate to quite an extent against academic misconduct. Also, exams that are non-essay based, it tends to be the essay based questions that are open-ended in time wise, and those are the ones that are open to academic misconduct. So if a graduate or a student is given, I don't know, 48 hours to complete an essay style question, and they're doing it independently, so on their own, they're not in controlled conditions, that does open up the floor to academic misconduct. However, those can be structured in such a way as the expectation is that the student will be looking things up. They are given references that they can use. If those things aren't banned, then all of a sudden it opens up another method of assessment, but that is less reliable. Short answer questions, again, can be less reliable, whereas a multiple choice question can be more reliable and less opportunity for academic misconduct. So it's looking at ways in which you are assessing where are the areas where there are more opportunities presented to students, especially in high stakes exams. If the outcome of the assessment is critical, then it can be opening up an opportunity to a student because they're feeling more pressure. So it's how we are structuring the exams in terms of what is the impact on the student, as well as the style of the assessment as well. So that the two have to come together. So it really is revisiting how you are assessing. Is that going to be the most valid and reliable form of assessment? And can you make changes and still get the assessment outcomes that you're looking for? So I don't think there's one size fits all, because it will also vary very much on the program content as to how it can be assessed, but it is very worthwhile looking at the assessment methodologies and actually having those conversations. Is this fit for purpose? Is this actually going to encourage our students to be searching elsewhere for achievement, and think outside the box? It's very much, it's just because this is the way that's always been done, is that the most appropriate way? I hope that answers the question.
Thank you very much, Kirsty. We have another question, which is for Andrea, which is about what was it that you meant regarding the relationship between artistic form and academic integrity? You said that ENQA Austria looks a lot into the sort of artistic integrity. Maybe you can elaborate a little bit on this relationship between artistic form and academic integrity.
Yeah, so that's is it Andrea? Is it okay?
Good question. The question says it's for Andrea, but I think in fact it's for Ulrika, because it's about the Austrian context. My apologies.
Sorry. To answer that, it's not that easy, to be honest, because the conversation has been only started. Of course, the sector, the higher colleges for arts in Austria have had the conversations before, but not within the context of quality assurance. So we're only just starting that with getting sectors to form their own nectars, so getting the sector of artistic colleges to form their own network and to get started on the topic and to first come up with a definition. And that's indeed quite difficult, because you cannot just take the academic integrity definition and use it for the same context, or for the artistic context. So this has been in the focus of the discussions. In Austria, what we do is to ensure that we have a very close relationship with those higher education institutions that focus on arts. So we are in fact trying to moderate and to be part of that conversation. So which is why we thought of having another conference next year where we can go a little bit in detail. We are also internally increasing our research in that area so that we can give more guidance here. And we are looking very much at benchmarking, at finding out what other institutions doing. Texas is very strong in the artistic integrity area. And that's how we collaborate with the institutions themselves.
Thank you very much. If anyone else has questions, please don't hesitate to post them. I know there's been a few technical questions asking if the slides and recording will be available afterwards, which of course they will do. Perhaps Sue, I could just ask you to stop sharing the presentation, then we can see the speakers more clearly. And perhaps a general question to all of you: what advice would you give to an agency that was looking to explore this topic in more detail and take more responsibility in their local context in terms of taking forward the conversation and the work on academic integrity, based on your experience, the work of your agencies, and perhaps what you heard within the working group? What one piece of advice might you give to agencies to start tackling this issue? Kirsty, I see you have your hand up. Go ahead.
I would say definitely collaboration is the key. It's working together. It's not imposing standards or values or a regime. It's understanding the local context, and it's definitely collaboration, I would say. Work with your institutions, don't work at them. So it's working out what's already there, what works, sharing good practice, and definitely collaboration.
Anyone else want to jump in on that?
Maybe I can provide what we have already discussed. Because we have seen the need to somehow tackle the issue of extraneous. And we didn't have that in our legislation before. And as we had the opportunity last year to introduce this in the new law of higher education, which has been approved, we have asked for advice. Well, part of the GAIN network, of course, it was actually when we heard first about this phenomenon and how it can be tackled, both in terms of legislation, but also in terms of the support for the students, which I think it's really very important. So we literally asked our colleagues from Australia and from PPY to send us what they have in their legislation on that, and we thank them for us. We really inspired from it, and we have proposed steps to the Ministry of Education, which have been taken in the new law. So at least now we have the legal framework, but it will be very important to see how well actually action and how to implement it. So from that sense, sharing knowledge and all the experiences is really very important for us.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And you mentioned GAIN. I would perhaps ask Sue in just a moment if she could just briefly do a little pitch for the Global Academic Integrity Network. But before that, there is another question to all speakers about whether you have any tips on how to make the conversation around academic integrity more positive when discussing with learners. I think this is one of the things that came up in Sue's introduction with one of the coloured quotes was really. But we focus a lot on the negative language, and how can we make it more positive?
I can add to that.
Please.
One of the key themes in our work on the topic was that we don't actually talk to students that much as we should be. And to make it more positive, you actually can listen to students because they have a lot to say. And in our perspective, many of the students are afraid of dealing with the topics. They don't want to do anything wrong. But once you get them engaged, they're actually very positive about it because it's about courage and about fairness. And most of the students really also want to go into that area. So not just dealing with the students who may go in the other side and other direction, but just dealing with the students who have something to say and use them as a starting point for positive language and perhaps a more holistic and positive preventative setting. Yeah.
Thank you very much. We have, I think, 1 more minute left, which means, Sue, you have 60 seconds to tell us a little bit about GAIN. We've talked a lot about collaboration, and of course, this is the purpose of GAIN. So maybe for those not familiar with it, you can just briefly explain and let us know how to find out more.
Absolutely. GAIN, the Global Academic Integrity Network, it's a network of quality assurance agencies, other institutions that are HEIs, other institutions that are interested in learning more about academic integrity. It's co-founded by QQI, Quality and Qualifications Ireland, and TEXA in Australia, very much recognizing that academic integrity is a global issue. All the problems that it has that have been created by the online industry, so to speak, the cheating industry, are global issues. They're not specific to any region, any jurisdiction, or any particular country. They meet 4 times a year. It's co-chaired by QQI and TEXA, but not by any means exclusive to them. And we'd really encourage people to join them if they possibly can. I'm going to put the web address up in the chat now, and you can learn more from looking at that. Thanks so much, Anna.
Thank you, Sue. I think one of the things that's come out of the inputs that we've had today, and also that came through very strongly in the report that the working group has produced, that of course, many agencies have different remit, different scope of what it is that they can do in their system. And, you know, we talk a lot about what kind of criteria and standards there might be related to academic integrity. At ENQA, we get asked a lot, you know, is this going to come through more explicitly in the next version of the ESG? But actually, I think what's come through very strongly is there's a lot of work to be done aside from the standards and criteria. So there's a lot of collaboration needed. There's a lot of conversation needed to make sure that this topic stays on the agenda. So I would very much, as Sue and Yvonne have done so already, I would encourage you to take a look at the report, which dives into some of these issues in a bit more detail and gives a little bit of insight as to what agencies can do to take forward this conversation. And we're already 1 minute over time, so that leaves me, I think, just to say a huge thank you to everybody that has contributed in one way or another. So to the chairs and the participants of the working group, to everyone in the ENQA community that contributed to the surveys and the interviews that gave material for this. To everyone that's participated in the conversation here today, and also to my colleagues that are making sure everything runs smoothly in the background. You will be able to find the material afterwards on the ENQA website. And I think I want to say goodbye. It's not really the end, I think, in terms of this topic, but really a call for action to work further on it. And certainly at ENQA, we look forward to exploring how we can take this forward further. So I wish you a good rest of the day, and thank you very much for joining today.